What is the Schomburg Center? To me, it is home. The place where we come to see who we really are, not just somebody else's reflection of who we are.
The Schomburg Center is a place of culture. It's a place of history. It's a place of knowledge.
The Schomburg Center, to me, is a repository of all of the things that has documented our sense of worth as a people.
For me, that means that it is a place of immense power.
The Schomburg Center is a public research library and a cultural institution
for the study of the Pan-African world.
It is perhaps the best in the world.
My Schomburg Center is Arturo Alfonso Schomburg.
Arturo Schomburg said, Black history and culture and intellect exists at a time when most people didn't believe that. He collected those evidences, and that became the beginning of the collection.
And it has expanded and has grown to where it is now a world-class institution.
It holds over 10 million items.
There's no parallel anywhere that brings to light what we as people of color have done, what we continue to do.
Black culture is all of culture. The universals that animate everyone's life happen here for all people.
The Schomburg for me is one of the center pillars of Harlem. When I started the journey of finding out about Red Rooster and Harlem, the very first place I went to was the Schomburg.
Researchers from around the world come and use what we have here.
I could not have written just about any of the books that I've written without the Schomburg Center's archives, resources.
The Schomburg Center is much more than a library. We encourage lifelong learning and exploration.
The Junior Scholars Program is a Saturday program with students from 5th grade to senior year in high school to help them learn about Black history and culture.
Learning about my history is important because it teaches me who I am.
The Schomburg Junior Scholars Program is going to do nothing but uplift them.
So many talented and brilliant people have walked the corridors of this amazing institution over the years. From Octavia Butler to Toni Morrison and James Baldwin, Ella Fitzgerald, Alvin Ailey, and Harry Belafonte, who graced the stage in this room of the American Negro Theater.
This place evokes great memories. It was a gift to us in our community to really try to find that space to reflect expressions of Black experience. I just knew that the environment and what I saw these young African Americans doing was a place I needed to be.
What is my Schomburg Center? I'm standing here at the Cosmogram, which underneath holds the ashes of the poet Langston Hughes. On the evening when this Cosmogram was dedicated, people began to empty out of the auditorium. A jazz trio struck up, and to my amazement, Amira Baraka went over and asked Maya Angelou for a dance. And they started to dance on top of the Cosmogram, on top of the ashes of Langston Hughes, and I felt what a fitting way to kiss the memory of Langston.
The Schomburg Center is a research institute and a library, but it's so much more than that.
There's something going on every day.
So many amazing people come here to talk about their creative craft, to share what inspires them. The Schomburg Center's collections help to tell stories even beyond our walls.
The Schomburg Center is here in this exhibition at MoMA, One-Way Ticket, Jacob Lawrence's Migration Series. We depend on the resources of the Schomburg to enable us to tell this story. Thinking about the implications of the past on the present is absolutely crucial for understanding the next steps, understanding what we have to do to go forward.
We today have the responsibility of making sure that new artists and activists, new scholars and poets know that this place continues to be a resource and a source of inspiration for the work that we must continue to do.
The Schomburg Center is knowledge.
The Schomburg Center, to me, is education.
The Schomburg Center is home, it is family, it is foundational.
The Schomburg Center is inspiration.
The Schomburg is with me in everything that I do.
Community, inside and out.
The Schomburg Center is us.
The Schomburg Center is you, and we invite each and every one of you to find your Schomburg Center.
Good afternoon, everybody. Hey, welcome to the Literary Activism Summit. Y'all made it through the snow? This is amazing. Y'all are so dedicated. That's awesome. My name is Anthony McPherson, but you can call me Tony. I represent Ars Poetica on the advisory committee for the Literary Action Coalition. I am a poet living in Harlem, and I'll be your host today. Yeah. Y'all can applaud for that, for sure. I'm gonna give y'all a quick run of the show, and then we're gonna jump right into it. Our first panel, The Right to Read in New York City, will take 1 hour. Then we'll take a 20-minute lunch where you can go and meet somebody new and treat yourself to a custom, one-of-a-kind poem from our typewriter poets provided by Ars Poetica. Who got one already? Some hands, all right, but all y'all got to get one. They're amazing. I know those poets personally. Then when we come back from lunch, we will have our second panel, which is called Writing the Future of New York City, where we'll hear a poem from our youth poet laureate, which is awesome. Then we'll take a 5-minute recess, followed by the main event, our keynote speaker, Iris Morales. Give it up for that. That's amazing. But before we jump into that, we're going to have some introductory remarks from a couple of key folks, starting with Clarice Rosas Sharif, the Chief Program Officer at PEN America. Please give it up, everybody, for Clarice.
Thank you. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us on this Saturday. It's really good to see you. So as the Chief Program Officer of Literary Programming at PEN America, I am very privileged to work on, I'm biased, but on the most exciting stuff we do. But it's really, I'm providing artistic direction to some of our major programmatic areas, and they include our Literary Awards program, our annual World Voices Festival of International Literature, the year-round Pen Out Loud Author Conversation Series, the Emerging Voices Fellowship, and some of our other creative writing workshops, and of course, the Literary Action Coalition. So it is my pleasure to start today's special convening to highlight the past, present, and future of literary activism in New York City with a really amazing lineup, as you just heard. And special thanks to Alejandro Heredia and the esteemed members of the Literary Action Coalition Steering Committee for putting together such a wonderful convening. For those of you who do not know about our organization, I just want to say a few words before we start. So PEN America stands at the intersection of literature and human rights, fighting for writers, defending their right to speak and write freely. We celebrate, nurture, and protect the power of imagination in literary and creative expression. You might ask why? Because it matters. Here and around the world, stories do matter. Literature contributes to citizens and communities that are intellectually healthy, capable of complex and contradictory thought, and able to also be empathetic. We are especially thankful to our nationwide membership of writers, readers, and allies across America in our chapter cities who really step up to the challenge and work with us to defend the challenges to free speech, to fight against the massive and concerted spread of book bans and dangerous legislative bills passed around the country. Our reports tackle the most pressing issues of the day: the need to protect local journalism, the need for diversity in newsrooms, in publishing, and also we're actually looking also at the impact of online abuse, specifically on women writers and people of color. And I invite you to find out more about our work by going to pen.org and join us in the good fight. So, in closing, special thanks to our partner and host for today, the Schomburg Center for Research in Black Culture. A round of applause. As you have heard in this wonderful introduction video, but also walking around the building today, take it in. This is such a special institution in New York City, a landmark, a community gathering, but also a place in my mind that uploads what I was just talking about. It's so important to know our history and culture, and this is a place where you can do that and learn more about Black culture, Black history, and we need that more than ever. And we also have here as a research institution, we have these wonderful librarians, and we know that librarians are under attack all around the country. So taking it today, just come back. I hope that you come back to the Schomburg. I hope that you actually bring somebody else to the Schomburg and introduce them to this wonderful institution. There's no other place that I would rather be today to convene this summit. So now, it's my extreme pleasure to welcome my colleague and Associate Director of Public Programs and Exhibition, Novella Ford.
Good morning, and thank you, Clarice. What she doesn't say is that she was my predecessor here, so I had very large shoes to fill when I started at the Schomburg Center. But welcome, everyone, to the Schomburg Center for Research in Black Culture. As she said, my name is Novella Ford. I'm the Associate Director of Public Programs and Exhibitions, and we are pleased to welcome PEN America's Literary Activism Summit, organized by Alejandro Heredia, the Literary Action Coalition, and an incredible group of co-conspirators. So anyone who is in the house who has had a hand in making this summit come to pass, please wave a hand, give them a round of applause. So I'm here just to tell you a little bit about what you can do while you're here at the Schomburg on this particular snowy Saturday, since you've already made the trek. In 2 short years, the Schomburg Center will host its centennial celebration in praise of the work by librarians and curators like Jean Blackwell Hudson, who is responsible for the 2 new buildings that the Schomburg Center finds itself in addition, that was added in addition to the 135th Street Library, where we got our start, but also in praise of our namesake, Arturo Alfonso Schomburg, and the 11 million items in our collections that explore historical and contemporary narratives focused on African American, African diaspora, and African experiences. We are one of the New York Public Library's renowned research libraries and a world-leading cultural institution. As Clarice said, librarians are often at the forefront of censorship controversies, shepherding patrons to books that reflect and expand our notions of the world. So at lunch or in between the sessions or after this activism summit is over, please take some time to view 2 pop-up exhibits curated by our librarians and archivists that are here. In our media gallery, which are up the stairs from the lobby where you are standing, is Black Shining Prints, Malcolm X as a Cultural Icon, which includes items from the Schomburg's collections on Malcolm X and foregrounds his legacy as a cultural icon. Now, I can't count the number of times that people have told me how the autobiography of Malcolm X has changed their world. It is one of those books that exemplifies a transformational journey of a man who continued to be unwavering in his fight for human rights. And I think it's the kind of thing that literature does when we understand that it is about the choices that we make that are political, and it's about the transformation and the journey that we take to get to those answers that we are looking for. On display in the Langston Hughes lobby on this side of the lobby are a selection of books that have been the target of banned books campaigns, including a first edition of Ralph Ellison's Invisible Man, published 71 years ago. And next week on March 1st, we will honor that publication and what would have been Ellison's 110th birthday with Invisible to Whom, a dialogue in verse. And so the Studio Museum in Harlem, the Schomburg Center, and Cave Canem commissioned poets Cameron Awkward Rich, Kadeem Gale, and Lorelei Williams to create poems inspired by the novel, as well as Elizabeth Catlett's sculpture, Invisible Man, a memorial to Ralph Ellison. Join us for an exploration of poetic contributions that have reframed the narrative around the book by focusing on houselessness, incarceration, femme and trans, and LGBTQ identifying people. The evening will include conversations as well as readings. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention the Schomburg Center's Literary Festival for you to save the date, which is on June 17th. I am so proud of the work that Clarice and her team have done to create that white paper that but if you have not read it, hopefully there's a link available or it talks about it in the brochure. And if not, ask someone from PEN America how you can read that particular paper on publishing, because it's so important to the work that gets done. And you can't talk about activism if we're not bringing everybody into the fold around literature. With that said, I invite you to learn more about the Schomburg Center at our website, which is schomburg.org. Again, I hope we will see you again soon. And please welcome Cheryl Davis, who is the General Counsel for the Authors Guild.
Thank you, Novella. Hello, everyone, and thank you all for joining us today on this very snowy Saturday, as she already said. I am Cheryl Davis, the General Counsel of the Authors Guild, which is the nation's largest and oldest professional writers organization. As a general matter, the Authors Guild advocates for authors on issues of public and professional concern, such as copyrights and First Amendment rights, and we've spoken out against and taken part in litigations to prevent book banning. We have always believed that authors are stronger together, which is why we are proud to be part of the Literary Action Coalition, let alone serve on the advisory committee. I'm incredibly excited and proud to welcome you into this space and to this event. The coalition work began as community convenings, where we gathered to discuss what social justice issues were most pressing for the literary arts community in New York City. In the last 3.5 years, our work has grown considerably. With a total of 50 members, the coalition has members in all 5 boroughs of New York City, collectively hires over 350 staff members and part-time workers, and impacts hundreds of thousands of people in New York City every year through literary events and festivals, community fundraisers, public readings, and other activities. Since 2020, the coalition has met regularly to organize a series of events and actions, including, but not limited to, a 2020 panel about racial justice in the publishing industry, a 2021 survey of over 450 participants to gauge the economic impact of COVID-19 on the New York City literary arts landscape, and a 2022 petition in support of the rap music on trial legislation, which aimed to combat the criminalization of rap music in the legal justice system. Chief among the coalition's priorities is to support the vitality of the literary arts community in New York City. We are committed to continue to work alongside key stakeholders to ensure that New York City reimagines how resources and support can be disseminated equitably to bookstores, nonprofits, libraries, writers, and all corners of our literary community. The coalition is proud to present the Literary Activism Summit as a culmination of everything we've been building for the past 3 years. As we propel ourselves into the next few years of this work, we invite you to stay engaged, stay connected, and look out for future coalition events and mobilization. You can follow us on Instagram at Literary Action Coalition to stay up to date about what we're up to. If you signed into the event, we'll send follow-up emails to everyone on the list about how they can continue to stay engaged with our work. Now, I am delighted to welcome to the stage First Deputy Commissioner of the Mayor's Office of Media and Entertainment, Pat Kaufman.
Hello, I'm Pat Kaufman, First Deputy Commissioner for Creative Service Programs at the Mayor's Office of Media and Entertainment. And on behalf of MOME and the City of New York, I'm happy to welcome writers, activists, readers, and community leaders to the inaugural Literary Activism Summit. MOME is proud to support today's summit by supplying CART live captioning and ASL interpretation, making this event truly accessible to all. Beyond today, our agency's role is to drive home the importance of the literary arts community throughout New York City and to shine a light on the many ways that writers and literary arts groups have contributed to the rich cultural history of New York City. Both of these objectives serve to further our mission to amplify New York City's diverse voices. Our support for today's event is an extension of our collaboration with PEN America around the Dreaming Out Loud series, tuition-free creative writing workshops for young immigrant writers who came to the United States while they were children. By providing community and professional support to the next generation of immigrant writers, the program seeks to counter anti-immigrant sentiment in the U.S. and to amplify the voices of many living in this country who are marginalized because of their immigration status. The program also helps to pipeline to publishing and theater industries in New York City, empowering dreamers to develop their own unique artistic voice and craft, to ensure that any future literary canon will include their stories, perspectives, and lived experiences. MOME's mission is to support and strengthen New York City's creative economy and make it accessible to all. The creative economy in New York encompasses film and television, music, theater, publishing, digital games, advertising, and nightlife. Together, these creative industries generate $150 billion in economic activity for this city and create 500,000 jobs. The publishing industry alone accounts for 95,000 jobs and $34 billion in economic output. That's why events like today, where literature and activism come together and are so important. And finally, I want to extend a big congratulations to Alejandro and the PEN America team for hosting, yes. For hosting today's event, and thank you to Novella for having us here at the Schomburg Center. And a profound thank you to the ASL interpreters, Johnny Colon and Candace Davida, and cart captioner, whose name I don't have because it was a last-minute change. But anyway, thank you, whoever you are. And all three who have worked so hard to ensure that this event is truly accessible. Thank you for coming. Enjoy the discussion. It's cold outside, but I bet the discussion gets hot. Thank you.
Y'all give it up for Clarice, Novella, Cheryl, and Pat one more time. For those introductory remarks, I think we've been properly introduced, so let's get into the meat of why we are here today. Panel number 1, the right to read in New York City, where we'll be discussing banned books, talk about it, and the protection of libraries. Moderated by Casey Mihan of PEN America, this panel features speakers Monica Carter of Lambda Literary, Saracia J. Fennell of The Bronx is Reading, and Amy McKell of Brooklyn Public Library. And now, without further ado, the right to read in New York City. Give it up. Y'all can keep clapping as they make their way up to the stage. Y'all, you know how to do it like that.
Wow. Hello, hello. Oh, thank you. We're on. We'll let everybody get settled. But we're so excited to be here, and I am really privileged to be on panel with Amy, Saracia, and Monica. I'm really looking forward to the discussion. We're gonna have a 40-minute discussion up on stage, but then we're leaving about 10 minutes for questions. So I can't really see, so somebody will have to help me with the discussion, the questions that come. But great. So to kick us off, I wanted to ask the panelists a little bit more about their role, and I'll start with Sarah Sia. So as founder of the Bronx is Reading, can you tell us a little bit more about the organization, the intention behind the name, and how the Bronx is Reading advances literacy and the love of reading?
Yes, absolutely. So, wow. I've been in book publishing now for a little over a decade, but back when I was starting, I knew nothing about publishing. I went to the City College of New York, and I did their publishing certificate program, and it kind of blew my mind. I had no idea about this industry. I thought that when books were published and read, that the person who wrote them was deceased, and we got to read their work and celebrate them in that way, but boy, was I wrong. And so fast forward, I landed an internship and then a job at Simon & Schuster, and I was working as a publicist, and I got to attend the Brooklyn Book Festival for the first time at 21 years old, and I had no idea that that event existed. And I rode the train back home to the Bronx. It was about an hour and 45 minutes because New York subways are a thing. And I sat with a book in my hand and said, wow, I got to meet writers, and I'm holding a book that is signed by a writer, and I am now riding the Iron Horse back to the Bronx, and why can't I have something like this in my borough? Why can't I have something like this in my community? And I started to think as the years went on and on and on. I would travel across the US to many book festivals, literary conventions, ALA, American Library Association. I would go to bookstores, and I was always blown away. And I would come back home to the boogie down Bronx and wonder, why do I have to leave my home? Why do I have to leave my community to enjoy these things? Where is the bookish community here? And that really sat with me, and I decided someone is going to change this. Someone will do the thing that needs to be done to show the people of the Bronx that they matter and that they do read and we see them. And 4 to 6 years into that research, no one had done it. And then the Barnes & Noble, the only bookstore in the Bronx at the time, was in jeopardy of closing. And I said, okay, well, I guess I really need to roll up my sleeves and do something. And it was very hard. I don't think that a Black intern for the Bronx who was, only 4 to 5 years in publishing could really make an impact. But I asked all of the people that I had ever met and all the connections that I had made, and I sat with people on the phone. I did email exchanges, and I asked them, do you really think that people would come to a book festival in the Bronx? Do you really think that the community would show up? And they said, well, if they're anything like you, a person from the community who loves reading and cares about books, I think they will show up. And so I had that down, and I had asked a couple of authors, do you think you'll come? And they said yes. And then I started to look to see, how can I make this happen? And I thought, I'll take my time, and I'll just, wait a couple of years, and then it'll happen. But because the Barnes & Noble was in jeopardy of closing, and we got it to stay open for 1 more year, I said, I have to do something for my community now. I need to show them that, they matter and I see them. But it was also to show the publishing industry that, hey, this is one of the publishing capitals really in the world, and nothing is happening in the Bronx on this scale. So pay attention and send those big names, send those award winners, bring them into the Bronx community, because this low status community needs that. And I was able to do a Kickstarter that nearly made me so anxious, but 636 people believed that we could raise over $35,000 in 13 days. So you can imagine how stressed out I was. But it happened, and then, of course, we held our first book festival, and it just happened to rain. And you're probably thinking, oh no, you got rained out, but I love the rain, so I saw it as a positive sign, but of course, all of the attendees did not. So I was very worried that people weren't going to show up, but we had over 700 people come through, and I couldn't believe it. I cried like a baby that day. And of course, everyone who came up to me said, when's the next one? Are you doing this next weekend? And it broke me because I said, wow, I don't have the capacity or the money to do a book festival on this scale every single weekend. But what can I do for my community? And that just kickstarted so many other things that I do for the Bronx is Reading, which is a book club, which is, currently working to bring another brick and mortar bookstore to the borough. Right now we have only one independent bookstore. I am highly focused on children and young people, and so that bookstore will be, I believe, one of the second or maybe third children's bookstores in New York City. And it's really hard, but I believe in it. I think the people of the Bronx believe in it. We are a low status community, so I do get feedback from some people that, saying, you don't need a bookstore, you have libraries. I grew up on libraries, and I think that's true. But for low status communities, do you know that people who live in poverty, 1 out of maybe 300 kids have a book in their home? Let that sit with you. We talk about book banning, but there's, no access in the Bronx, right? Parents are working 2 to 3 jobs. They don't even have the time to take their kids to the library. Shout out to my library that's open on Sundays, though. I get to go. So thank you to the New York Public Library for making sure some of the branches are open on Sundays. I really appreciate that. But there's still so much work that needs to be done in the Bronx. And I'm here for it. I am very passionate about it. I still work in book publishing, and I still talk to people, hey, you come to New York City, but have you ever come to the Bronx? And a lot of them will say, well, I don't know, the Bronx, what's in the Bronx? And I'm like, well, there's a lot of fun stuff in the Bronx, and don't just come into the South Bronx, go deeper, go further up north. Don't just bypass the Bronx and skip us entirely and go to New Rochelle or Connecticut. Like, come and stop, come and see what we have to offer. Some of your favorite literary writers are from the Bronx, right? Mary Higgins Clark, James Baldwin went to high school in the Bronx. Stan Lee, Wakanda Forever, from the Bronx, George A. Romero. I could go on and on and on, but this is a part of the work that I do in the community because there are lots of Bronx writers, and they're like, well, who's even from the Bronx? And then I spew all these names, and they're like, were you serious? I didn't know that. That person's a celeb. What? Huh, and I'm like, yeah. And so these people who are still living and from the Bronx, if you are watching this or if this appears on your feed, I would love for you to come back home to the Boogie Down Bronx to show people this is the community that made me, and I'm coming back to grace the wonderful people of the BX, which is a particular type of people. But, we're out here.
We out here. We're going to hop on over to another borough and talk a little bit about Amy, and then we'll come back, of course, with many questions. You gave us so much already, but I want to talk to Amy a little bit about the Brooklyn Public Library. So Brooklyn Public Library has really demonstrated their leadership over the last 1.5 years in the fight against book bans through the Books Unbanned initiative. Amy, can you tell us a little bit about Brooklyn Public Library and that particular initiative and all the work you're doing?
Of course. I'll just try to help people understand why we launched Books Unbanned and what it is and some of the impacts that we've seen since we launched the program. So Books Unbanned is really Brooklyn Public Library's national response to the coordinated rise of book bans and censorship that we're seeing in schools and libraries. And not much of that is happening on the same scale here in New York City, let's be honest. But we've seen our colleagues, we see young people struggling, we see the data, and we know that so many of these books being targeted are written for young people, for young adults, and the vast majority of them have themes that are written by or about LGBTQ persons or about race and racism and other kind of identities that people are working to suppress. So we felt like we wanted to try to do something. Our answer at Brooklyn Public Library was, let's just give everybody a library card. And what we decided to do is create a national teen e-card. We opened up our typical non-resident application process, which is just an online application, and we allowed a pass-through for anybody ages 13 to 21, anywhere in the United States could request a library card from us. and they would immediately get access to our entire digital collection, so 500,000 ebooks and audiobooks and over 100 databases. So we launched that initiative in April of last year in coordination with National Library Week. And so, of course, it's been almost a year since we've had that program up in place. We've heard from thousands and thousands of teens. They've shared their stories with us. They're very upsetting to read. They're very hard to read. We've issued more than 6,000 e-cards from kids in every state, DC, Puerto Rico, and they've checked out over 70,000 books.
Wow.
So it's really cool. It's also upsetting because a little bit on what you were saying, Cericia, was that one of the things I've really come to learn and kind of profoundly understand through this initiative, and being the one on the other end reading some of those stories, is that for young people, wherever their families have chosen to live in this country, if they don't already have access to books, if that access is not readily there, freely there, that attempts at censorship is devastating. They just take, that book is gone, poof, it disappears. They have no way to access it otherwise, or very, very limited and difficult road to try to access those books. So we really need to get back to having stronger libraries, stronger school libraries, lots of access to books everywhere so that these young people have choices. That's what we've tried to do. And we're working to build more of a coalition with other libraries who might be able to do the same thing. So more to come, stay tuned.
To come. Awesome.
Thank you.
And Monica, so Lambda Literacy champions LGBTQ literature by advocating and supporting LGBTQ authors and writers. Can you talk a little bit more about the organization, your role, and particularly your work with the Writers in School program?
Sure. First of all, I just wanted to thank you for the opportunity to be here and to say that I love the Bronx and Bronx people. And woohoo! I'm here for you. And I love the Brooklyn Library as well. So I support everyone here. So similar, I think, to Cericia's story is that I grew up where there weren't any books about LGBTQ plus people. I didn't know they existed. I didn't know they were there. I had no clue even to ask. And I remember wanting to become a writer, which I am. And the only way that I knew how to do that was to learn from others. And that's how I found out about Lambda Literary. Still, only have read at the time about like 2 or 3 queer authors. There still wasn't access to them. So I was able to go to this workshop that I was luckily admitted to, and after the workshop ended, I felt so blessed to be able to meet with other people like me, other writers like me. And then I thought, how many kids out there don't have access to books like these? How many? And it's innumerable. And publishing wasn't letting us in. Traditional institutions weren't letting us in. And so I decided to volunteer for Lambda, and fast forward 10 years later, and now we have a $500,000 contract with the New York City Department of Education to bring LGBTQ plus writers and their books.
It's amazing.
Into schools throughout New York City. We're in 48 out of 51 districts. We have tremendous support for this program, and we bring in these working writers so that there are those critically necessary safe spaces for students, LGBTQ students, and their allies to talk about these topics and to learn how to thrive as an LGBTQ plus person. And for me, that speaks to everything that I missed. And I don't want kids to miss that, because they're out there. And when we don't have that, there are consequences that are very damaging. Mm-hmm. And I just think it's important that we continue doing the work we do. And I appreciate all of you for coming here today to even listen to us talk.
Thank you. So, access, representation, these are some themes. And I think if it's not clear, also this panelist is wearing many hats up here. So we have founders, directors, authors, poets, publicists, editors, all up on the stage. And one thing that binds us all together is really this commitment to the freedom to read. So I'd like to have a discussion. Just what does that term mean to you? What does freedom to read mean?
Sure, for me, one word, liberation, right? Education, power. I constantly think about the freedom to read and the folks in the Bronx, the young people who I'm like, hey, you want a book? Because I give away free books. And they're like, oh, miss, I don't read. And I'm like, oh, really? Well, let's talk about the gentrification. Let's talk about you wanting to get an apartment. Let's talk about blah, blah, blah. And then they're like, oh, well, you said read. And I'm like, yeah, but you have to read to lead a better life. So it's not just reading for pleasure, right? It's all of it. The Bronx has a lot of issues, right? Asthma, health things, all of these wonderful, terrifying things in this low status community. And you mean to tell me you don't want to pick up a book and read and try and change your life? And then they're like, oh, well, when you put it that way. And I'm like, and the book is free. And they're like, oh, you should have said it was free, miss. And I'm like, oh, okay, let's talk about it. So for me, it's really, how can I engage with these people to let them know your ancestors literally could not do this, and you're gonna tell me you don't want to read and you have the opportunity to do so? No, we need to talk about this. And I think also, really quickly, just making sure everyone has access to it. And so there's also, a lot of people in the Bronx who don't speak English, don't read in English. And so they don't have the freedom to just walk in and pick up a book because there's a language barrier. So thinking about things like that there's always a challenge. And there are some things that we, just take for granted.
I agree. When you say access, it really is about access, and everyone should be able to read what they want to read. And if we don't support the writers who are marginalized and allow them the creativity and the freedom to write those stories, then we take away their personal agency and they're ignored, diminished, erased. And I can't see that happening. I don't want that to happen. And I think everyone should have access. It's an individual right.
Yeah. This is actually something that I feel so blessed to be a librarian, and this is something that we defend very fiercely in libraries. School libraries all libraries share the same set of professional values, but school libraries have slightly different framework that they work within, and public libraries really have that mandate and to protect the right to read and the right to read freely. And what that means to me is that you have access to all points of view without restriction. And you can go to the Brooklyn Public Library's website, you can pull down our material selection policy, and you can go ahead and read through what we have set into place, the framework that we operate within to make sure that we're protecting your freedom to read, protecting your freedom to access all points of view without restriction. It's not always easy. There are also limitations. We have space limitations, funding limitations, and we try to curate the kinds of collection that our public asks for and wants and needs and deserves. But if I had to kind of put a simple way to think of it when public libraries are making these decisions is we look for reasons to include it. We don't look for reasons to exclude it. And there are, it's not always easy. Even within the library profession, people disagree, and they disagree fiercely over what should be on library shelves. The Brooklyn Public Library does receive challenges. Libraries in general take the right of the public to challenge what's in the library collection as well very seriously. So I know we talk about book banning, and it's a very serious issue right now, but I do want to underscore that that dialogue, that conversation between the community and the library is very important and it's essential. And so the public library, when we do get those challenges and we treat them, like I said, very seriously and with a lot of thought and care to revisit and reconsider in some cases why we have chosen to include something in our collection. And people challenge materials in our collections for all kinds of reasons. People challenge books that they think have inaccurate information or that they're outdated and they contain offensive tropes and themes. They challenge books that they personally made them uncomfortable and they don't see any reason why the library should. So we receive challenges to books, periodicals, databases, programs, some cases artwork. We receive challenges to lists that we've curated or displays that we've put up. So all of these can give us an opportunity to constantly defend and protect why we've made those selections and to educate the community what that means, to walk past something if it's upsetting to you, but to leave it there and protect somebody else's right to read it and access it.
Yeah, and I appreciate your framework around like the rationale of inclusion versus always, focus on the exclusion. I think that's an important piece. I want to situate this a little bit, and I think we've already talked about it, like the barriers that exist in New York. So, PEN America, Brooklyn Public Library, we certainly spend time tracking book bans, which are happening nationally. We do know there are challenges happening in the city as well around books, but book banning is like one of many ways you can see access to books restricted. So let's talk about barriers that exist in New York City. What types of barriers do you see that restrict the right to read in New York?
Well, lack of attention to school libraries. School libraries are disappearing. Mm-hmm. It's happening in New York. It's a nationwide trend. The New York City Department of Education Office of Library Services runs an annual survey where they collect information about school libraries and certified school librarians, and you can go look at that map and you can see where the disparity exists, where school libraries exist in our city and where they don't. And you will not be surprised when you look at the communities that have libraries and the communities that don't. Because it's so frustrating and even shocking that this trend persists, especially in New York City, because at the state level, the commissioner has regulated that school libraries should be in existence for every secondary school in New York City, and it doesn't happen. It's not happening. And the schools play all kinds of tricks, and they look for ways to repurpose those spaces and repurpose those people. And if you'd like to learn more about that, you can go to a website called Every Library. They do many things to advocate for libraries, but one of the things they do is spell out what's happening with school libraries and what you can do. And to kind of sum it up, if the school library is really, there's so much value to having a school library and a school librarian in a building. When you start eradicating that and taking that away, what happens is young people don't have a collection freely at their fingertips. The public library is great, but there are reasons you cannot go to the public library. So, but people are in school and they deserve to have that access and that collection curated for them by a person who's been trained and is certified in that work and who is doing other kinds of instruction and programming to support learning how to research, learning how to learn and kind of nurture a love for learning about the world and lifelong learning and that kind of thing. So I would say there's probably many factors at play, but that's something that we should all be very concerned about and think about the impacts of.
I can attest to the school libraries facing these challenges every day. We work with the Office of Library Services at the New York City Department of Education. And they shield me from hearing a lot of these stories and a lot of the letters that they receive. But it happens. And I know a lot of people think in New York City, it's not happening. It's happening. It's happening. And, it starts at the local level. So I think, the politicization of book banning and those efforts that started, have now just gained momentum and are everywhere. And that's because they had a concerted effort and vigorous social media campaigns. And so without you know, the rest of us having voices or making those voices heard, it's difficult to fight that. But the fact of the matter is, we elect these people that provide that money. Mm-hmm. And if we don't start looking at the school boards, at the local leaders, at your council person, all these people, they have to listen to you. They have to. You put them there. And they control the money. And don't let them control it in one particular way. We can't legislate one perspective.
Absolutely, and I just want to add, you can't call it a book ban if the books don't exist. Right. So everything you are saying is something that I experience in probably all of the schools that I work with in the Bronx. They have the space. There are no books on the shelves. But I do want to flip the script really quickly and give a shout out to teachers. I work with lots of teachers who they say, I have a classroom library. And I'm like, oh, okay, that's great, but you know, where are we going to host this author when I bring them into the school? I want to have as many students come as possible because I want to give away 200 books. Can we host it in the library? We can host it in the library, but there are no books on the shelves, so I'm a little embarrassed. Can we do this in the auditorium? And I was flabbergasted. You mean to tell me you have a space, but there are no books on the shelves, right? And so I know we're here to talk about banned books, but think about that. In New York City, in these Title I, in these public schools, in these low-status communities, in communities like the Bronx, largely marginalized, where I'm telling you, right, there is no literary access there, and it's a major issue. You can't call it a book ban if there are no books in the space where these young people go to learn. And I'm gonna get very emotional right now. I am a product of the New York City school system. I never had an author come visit me in school. I'm the first high school graduate in my family, the first college graduate, first person to get a master's degree in my family. And I am now the representation that the young people in my family are looking to strive at, right? To be a role model. But there are hundreds of kids, when I go into these schools, they don't see books on the shelves. When I bring in authors to come and visit them, they pull me aside, young students. Hey, I really enjoyed this, but I don't have any money to get this person's book. Oh, don't worry, sweetheart. You're getting the book for free. I just want you to remember that, okay? Yes, book banning sucks, but you cannot call it a book ban if there aren't any books on the damn shelves to begin with. So just think about that.
Yeah. I mean, I think we have to end here with, like, you know, just the call to action. I mean, we got to come back. We got to uplift a little bit. We're with you. We're with you. So we have, you know, a room full of, you know, people who are committed. Like, what can we do individually and collectively? What can we do to protect and celebrate the right to read?
Start local. Mm-hmm. It's all within your power. It's all within the politics. It's in the funding. You can support it in any way by buying a bookstore, buying a book by a marginalized person, by going and writing to your libraries and asking for books by marginalized people. Trying to get money to the places that don't have money so they can build a library. But it's making those choices every day. And I think educating people, trying to gain access, volunteering, supporting in any way you can, defending the institutions that help defend marginalized voices is extremely important, because we can do it on an individual level, but it really takes all of us to do it. And we have to make that effort for ourselves, for the future. And I'm just proud to be part of the community and with these folks on the stage and with everyone here, because this is what it takes. I mean, you've just done something today. Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. You wanna go? No, you go.
Okay. Well, this is a tough one. Maybe I'll say the opposite of what you said, and maybe go national. Living in New York City, and I include myself in this
our sensibilities are somewhat like dulled. We don't see what's happening elsewhere. And it's really, really difficult to envision a life where you really don't have access to just books, but the kinds of things that you like to read, the kinds of things that you gravitate towards, and we have so many options to get those things. I am personally drowning in options to access something that that sounds interesting, I'll grab it. It's in my hands in a matter of days or weeks, or in some cases instantly, and so many people do not have that. And I think Penn and Brooklyn Public Library just ran this wonderful teen virtual institute called the Freedom to Read, and what we told these young people is the first step is really to educate yourselves. I'm sorry to sound so trite, but please try to pay attention to what's happening, read, and try to go beyond the headlines. As a librarian, I encourage people to kind of test your information literacy skills. Try to learn both sides of the issue. Try to understand why people, in some cases, community members have genuinely trying to help. They genuinely feel that they're doing the right thing and they're protecting their children and the people in the community, and try to understand how some of these things are spinning out of control. Try to understand the process through which these materials are getting targeted and challenged, and find your own path to perhaps what you can do, whether it's writing letters, not just fighting, right? Don't forget to write letters to support the people who are also doing the fight. Write letters to librarians and teachers, or tweet at them, or whatever you do to show your support. And it's been really, really scary and dangerous for a lot of people trying to protect that right out there.
Yeah, absolutely. The only couple of things I'll add is if, we all have our own sense of privilege, right? Some of us are more financially privileged than others. So if you feel like you don't have the time to volunteer, you feel like you don't have the time to check out locally what's going on, donate to the organizations that are doing the work, and that's how you can contribute. If you have time on your hands, if you are a parent, if you are an aunt, a godmother, godfather, whatever it is, if you care about young people, if you care about your neighborhood, you should, start to see what's going on in my neighborhood, what's happening here, because believe it or not everything makes the news, right? So what's happening in Florida could very well be happening in your own neighborhood, but it's just not making the news, especially if you belong to a low status community like the people living in the Bronx, for example, right? There are no books on those shelves, but the people living there, they're not going to really make a lot of noise about that because there are other issues in the community that they're tackling and dealing with. So think about, okay, I have time on my hands today. What can I do? Maybe I can write a letter. There are plenty of templates online that people create, and they're just like, hey, just edit this, put your name, put a signature here, right? Here's a link to donate. You can support these people. You can figure it out. If you are ever, going on vacation, make a day of service. Hey, I'm going on a staycation this week. I'm going to take a day to specifically volunteer with this school or this hospital or this organization that is doing something meaningful. I think what most people ask me, how did you start this activism? Like, how did you get to where you are? And I'm like, well, years of telling myself someone else is gonna see this issue and do something about it. And no one was doing anything, and I had to turn the light onto myself. Why aren't you doing anything? You see the issues, you're talking about the issues, you seem to have lots of thoughts about what people should be doing. Well, I went out and did it, and I didn't think it was going to make waves. I didn't think it was going to change anything, but it did. And so if you are feeling that fire right now, listening to the things that we are saying, and you want to, spark change, it just takes one small act. And who knows, you might just have a conversation with someone that might spark them to do something, and it buoys and becomes something really big. So you never know what that one small thing could do. Your dollar could be the thing that I need to, give a kid in the Bronx a book. Your 1 hour of volunteer time might be the thing that, sets Lambda to hitting their mark for, how many books they wanted to give away. I don't know what the goal is, but that one thing, that one act of activism that you can take out of your busy day, your New York 1 minute to do will literally impact and change a life.
Can I?
So I know we were hoping to.
Can I just add one thing? You can also just talk about the great books that you're reading.
Yeah.
I mean, that's another way, because your passion will spread.
We're all here for book recommendations.
We're gonna get there. We need to come back to the panel. But if there is a question, I know we're running a little tight on time. But if there is a question, we probably have. Yeah. Okay.
Oh, here.
Oh, okay. Oh, maybe there's a line. Sorry.
The mic is in the back of the room, so.
Oh, right behind you, I think.
Now you can see. Oh, okay, I see. I don't know how you could see a line.
It's a cover.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
I've been told I never know when to keep my big mouth shut, but but I'm going to open it loud. While I was told Lord has still allowed me to be here, I'm 88 years old, and I am a retired school library media specialist. And I'm very curious to know what is going on the elementary level. You don't wait till the kids get to high school to start preaching books, reading, and using reading of everything under the sun to do research. That starts when they're this high. Mm-hmm. So that by the time they get this high, they will be in a position to make some decisions themselves about what they want to do, how they want to do research, and to be able to do the research because they started early. But it starts in kindergarten.
Yes.
It starts in kindergarten with beautifully illustrated picture books for someone to come and read to them, or for a particular period, with visits to the library. Classroom collections are fine, but you have got to have a central library in the school.
Yes.
And not just wait for the public librarian to do it. It's got to be in the school so it becomes good old stuff for the kids.
Okay, The public librarian can't do it, and they shouldn't do it. It should be the school librarian doing it. So completely agree.
Okay, I asked my mother to make sure to ask the question, because when I heard the mention of librarians in high schools but none in elementary through middle, I freaked out just a little bit.
Yeah, the schools I was talking about is middle school and elementary schools. Library, they have a library space, no books on the shelves. It's a very sad story in the Bronx.
And we service, I want to call out parents and publishers here, sorry. But when we started bringing K through 8 into our fold, there weren't a lot of books about families that were queer and trans, and there just weren't. And we had requests from elementary teachers. We had requests from middle grade teachers. And finally, it's starting to catch up. But it's making that noise that makes that happen. But publishers and parents, we still have parents pulling kids out of classes, whether they be elementary, middle school, or high school, when the author comes to visit, because they don't want them exposed to LGBTQ plus literature.
Yep.
So,
third grade is really kind of a magic milestone. I'm going to generalize here, but we know that if students aren't reading at grade level by third grade, it's very difficult to catch them up. So there's a lot of efforts. I think there's a lot of awareness about that, which is good. But third grade seems to be, and you see this in Florida with the Don't Say Gay bill and everything, that we cannot expose children to certain topics or themes prior to third grade. It should be illegal, right? That's what the cultural awareness is building momentum. Yep. And that's also very scary as well. And we're talking about a lot of different things all at once here, but the point I want to make is that even if an elementary school library exists, even if there's a healthy classroom library or a healthy school library, teachers and librarians are feeling a lot of pressure to pull books on certain subject matters out from being available and even visible from young children.
I think we have another question. Oh, yeah, okay.
Hi, thank you so much for being here, and thank everyone for being here. I'm going to talk a little bit about Drag Story Hour.
Yes.
I'm part of a community group that is not an organization, but we've been defending them since about September, and it's been growing a lot. It's a lot of people that are involved, but if anybody wants to talk to me about that, but there's a lot of misinformation, and we are under attack in a lot of ways because what they read about is just differences in people, and they are in all different communities, in all 5 boroughs. We had an extremely violent one that ended up in Staten Island, no surprise, with actual Proud Boys that came over from New Jersey. There were Proud Boys that have been in Queens, and I think the system is working exactly as it's supposed to, which is to oppress people. And so any feedback or thoughts that you have, it is, you just said we're talking about all these different things and everything is so tied together. Librarians are as important as nurses, and we're not treating any of those people that way. So, thoughts on any experiences that you've had and other things the community can do, because we're all kind of learning how to work with librarians now, whereas previously we were learning to work with like clinic defense at Planned Parenthood. It's becoming almost that violent with people just trying to walk in and get books.
I just want to speak quickly to that. So thank you for your question. Yes, as far as the drag queen story hour, it's become this kind of like symbol of what to fight against. And this is why I say start local, because 3 Congress council people were targeted from New York City. Eric Botcher of the 3rd District had groomer painted on his apartment building floor. Crystal Hudson in the 35th District in Brooklyn has also had people like videotaping her home. There are scary things going on, and that's why if you talk to these local folks, this is what that means. They pledge to give more money to that organization because of this. So it has to be, we have to know about it, and we have to learn about it, and we have to educate, but also we have to protect those people that are trying to protect us.
A few things you can do. You can work with your local school, especially if you're a parent of a child in a school right now, to make sure the school administration has some pretty clear and fair policies in place for how they bring authors in to speak to students. In other words, that the school can't decide that they have a more stringent application process for author A if they don't like what author A has to say, or they don't like what author A looks like or represents. So that's a place where some of this nonsense is happening, where schools are censoring even authors coming into schools because they just don't want to put up with the community getting upset about it. So that's one place you can start. You can, the Drag Queen Story Hour anti-movement is well documented. You can look up and learn more about where where libraries are having these sort of counter protests and very angry and scary people showing up. And the other point I want to make, this is just kind of a general point, is that we've talked a little bit about rights, our freedom to read, our freedom of expression, and librarians have that right too. We have a right to help people navigate the world and open pathways for them through displays or programs or lists or other kinds of things. And that right hasn't often been really well protected, so that's something that sort of a chink in the armor that we need to figure out how to defend libraries and their right to share information as well.
Yeah, and I'll just add, I mean, I think from, PEN America does a lot of work tracking legislation and efforts nationwide that have been, anti-drag story hours. And like it does fall under this larger narrative around what is harmful, what is obscene, what is pornographic. And I think the more we can do to push back against that language, because it's misinformation, as was shared in the question. So, just bringing that into sort of all parts of freedom to read, pushing back against where something is just wrong and is not true. I think we have one more question. Yeah. Okay, go ahead.
Good afternoon. I would like to donate some books. Where can I donate the books?
Man, there's so many organizations that take book donations, but you can always come to the Boogie Down Bronx and we'll take your books. Yeah, but you can connect with me afterwards, and I'm happy to share resources with you. And I'm sure probably everyone's website probably has information about what you can and cannot donate. I think some organizations, it shouldn't have wear and tear. There shouldn't be like comments in the books and stuff like that. But
I would love to also say homeless shelters are a great place to donate books.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you for the question. I think our panelists are sticking around for maybe the rest, or at least a little bit. So more questions during lunch, or okay, why not? Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Hi, I am a elementary school teacher actually, and one of my questions was, I got really emotional when you were talking about like books not existing on the shelves, and one of the things that like keeps me up at night a lot is, literacy rates right now. And it's just like, we have, sometimes access, especially to the Brooklyn Public Library, to these wonderful texts on, race, sexuality, gender. But one of the things that like is so hard then is like literacy acquisition in public schools when they're constantly being defunded. Their resources are constantly being taken away. And so I'm wondering if any of your organizations are connected to literacy efforts that you could share, or like, when we're talking about banned books and books that don't exist, it's also like the reading comprehension and the reading acquisition that like needs to be supplemented, but the city is not funding. So do you have any research, like especially the Brooklyn Public Library, are there any connections to like things that families can go to, things that teachers can go to, where like there is additional help outside of school?
Yes. One of the most beautiful things that can happen is when a teacher and a school librarian and a public librarian work together and have a really good relationship. And they all understand their piece of the relationship, and they each brings a unique point to the relationship, ultimately with the beneficiary being the child. That almost never happens. So the number one thing I used to work in school outreach full-time. It's a full-time job was to figure out how to get schools to work with the public library, and it's very challenging. So your question is about the programs and services that exist from the public library. We have so many, I could drone on and on for half an hour about it. It's very difficult to help schools and families and communities be aware of those things and take advantage of them. And take advantage of them appropriately, where they're not just like, oh, here's someone else coming in to do the job that we're under-resourced and we can't do it. So to answer your specific question, we have many, of course we have the most famous program of all, summer reading, which helps to make sure children have a place to go to access books and learning and programming over the summer when the schools are closed. After school programming that very specifically is tailored to families of younger children, Every Child Ready to Read, kind of the research that's done to show that parents of children under 5, what they need to know to develop those pre-literacy skills to get ready to read by the time they enter that kindergarten classroom or that first grade classroom. They have those building blocks in place. So please, I'll give you my card, or you can seek me out, or you can go on our website and navigate yourself to the places where we kind of list out all of those resources, all the way up through high school and college. I hope that answered your question. There's a lot to say.
Yeah, I just quickly want to add that a lot of these low status communities are, where marginalized people live. And sometimes the language that you use to tell a parent your child is failing, they don't quite comprehend that. For example, if you're going to use AAV, right, which is African American vernacular, and you tell them, listen, your kid is like a dud or something like that, they'll probably understand that a little bit faster. And some of you might be saying, like, where is she going with this? But I think you also need to think about who you're talking to, right? And how can you make the language around what the issue is that the child is facing digestible to the parent who now has this barrier with you, right? You're talking about illiteracy, but there are several adults in the world that, you know, because the system is what it is, these people who don't make it, right, and don't ever read at a whatever level, college level, et cetera, they grow up to become adults. And those adults have children, right? And so there's still a barrier there. The other thing I want to say is I recommend to parents that do struggle, oh, I want to read with my kid, but I actually, you know, can't read some of the stuff that's in this book. And I'm like, that's okay. Have you heard of audiobooks? Right? Your child can be reading the book and you can be listening to the book. And so there are some things that they can do if they don't have time to go to these programs. I spend a lot of time having conversations with people who are working several jobs and just don't have time, right? Everyone's strapped for time because they have other things that they're worried about. And the biggest thing they're worried about is food. How am I going to provide my family with food? Right? If food is not on the table, then the child can't learn to read, they can't do their homework, they can't do anything. And so I just want you to keep that in mind as a teacher, as a parent, as anyone who's working in these educational spaces, that when you are delivering news that is very important, right? Make sure it's digestible for the person you're delivering it to. If you're noticing they're not being receptive, they're not understanding what you're saying, get creative and try and figure out how you can get that message across. But I will highly recommend audiobooks. It's something that has helped some of the people in my community doing companion reading with young people.
That's a great recommendation. Thank you all. All right, this is our rapid round. What are you reading? What are you working on? Or what events or opportunities do we all need to know about?
Well, I brought my book with me. I'm reading Racial Innocence by Tanya Kateri Hernandez, which I think she might have done an event here. And the Bronx is Reading will be hosting a book club with her in March in West Harlem. So stay tuned for that.
There you go.
I'm reading, I'm combining passions, so I'm reading Concerning My Daughter by a South Korean author, Kim Hae-jin, and translated by Jamie Chang, put out by Restless Books. But it's about a mother and a daughter, a lesbian daughter, trying to come to terms with their relationship and the other types of prejudice that they're facing in the world. And it's a lovely book.
Okay, so I'm not always this organized, but I have two Irish authors lined up I'm very excited about. One is called Seven Steeples by Sarah Baum, and the other one is called Foster by Claire Keegan.
Yep.
Did you read that?
Yep.
Oh, okay, I'm excited.
So good.
And speaking of audiobooks, thank you, Public Library. I've been listening my way through the Bob Woodward trilogy of the Trump presidency, which is Fear, Rage, and Peril, or some order like that. And I listened to them out of order, so my hold on the middle one just came in. Right, so I'm kind of jumping all over the place. But I love... honestly, a plug for this, I love listening to them on audio because there's like 16 hours of whatever. And yeah, I go for a walk at night or on the subway or whatever, and it sticks better when I'm out and walking around instead of sitting in a chair. So I never thought audiobooks were for me, and they really don't work for fiction, but super big plug for nonfiction audiobooks. Yeah.
All right, well, please join me in thanking Amy, Sarasia, and Monica for such a fantastic panel discussion.
Oh my God, what an amazing panel, am I right?
Yeah.
Oh my God, give it up for your panelists and your moderator. We're gonna do a short lunch. We're gonna be back here at 1:40 for our second panel, Writing the Future of New York City. I wasn't done talking. No, go. I'll see you at 1:40, y'all.